Hey guys, this is Melissa Zad for Into Boxing, and I am delighted to be joined by the one and only Dave Coldwell. How are you doing?
All right, thanks. How are you?
Oh, very well. All the better for speaking to you. Nice to see you again. Obviously, we've got Jordan Gill on the card. How are we feeling?
Good. I love big fight weeks, and this one for Jordan, it's huge. It's huge. His profile skyrocketed after the last performance. We're straight into another blockbuster fight where you're in against an absolute sledgehammer of a puncher in Kiko Martinez, fully experienced, two-time world champion, something like a five-time European champion, something ridiculous like that. So it's a huge fight, and it's a world title eliminator.
I mean, Kiko is a legend in the game. He's achieved so much. He's been in some extreme scraps.
Yeah.
And obviously, Jordan coming off of his last fight into this fight, respect to him, he's not back down. This is a really, really big deal, a really big fight for him. As you say, world title eliminator. How is he handling the nerves going into it?
It's fine. Do you know when there's a difference between being nervous and being excited? He's excited. So he's still got that feeling, but it's excitement because you know that you've done everything right. You know that you've not had niggles and injuries and things like that. And you know you've had a really good run of preparation. You're a consummate professional anyway, not just for 8, 10, 12 weeks, throughout all your career since you started. So there's no need to doubt yourself. Obviously it's a big deal because talking about the level of opponent you're fighting, the awkwardness, because usually Jordan's like either punching up or at least on the same sort of level. With Kiko you've got something that's lower. So that's one thing we've had to prepare for that's a little bit different. He's excited.
It's actually a really big difference, that height adjustment, because obviously, when you're, because I do a bit of boxing myself, when I'm usually the shorter one, and I get quite used to, and I get quite used to punching upwards, and then when I'm in the ring against someone who's shorter than me, I actually forget what I'm meant to be doing. So as a coach, what are some of the adjustments that you've made in terms of his training?
It's just making sure that he doesn't punch over and getting you. It's getting used to a fighter that's punching upwards and coming up from under you. It's because he's short, and then also he's squatting down. Do you know what I mean? So as he comes into you, what helps a little bit is that Jordan's coach is short as well, and so I can, even when we're on the pads, I'm literally that same sort of size. Actually, I'm a little bit taller than Kiko, but I slip that one because that doesn't happen ever. But yeah, so
guys, he's taller than Kiko. All right.
We've prepared for that. I mean, that's part of the game. But like I said, that's one of the few things where you do have to adjust for things.
In terms of obviously, Kiko being the shorter opponent and just being, a short boxer in general, he's obviously quite aggressive, very compact. So obviously, Jordan having to utilise that jab and keep him at the end of it rather than under it is going to be super important. Yeah. Really looking forward to seeing him do that on Saturday night.
Yeah, I mean that's the simplest form, is keep on the end of the jab. That's it. But it's not as easy as that, because there are going to be moments when Kiko gets on top of you, and that's why we have sparring. That's why we prepare for things where they do get on top of you. You have to be able to either. You don't even have to match that, but you have to be able to nullify that. You have to be able to cope with those sort of pressure moments. And Jordan's already proved that he can cope with pressure moments where things are going wrong, going against him. So these are the reasons why fights like that, where things go wrong, are actually, if you can come through them, things go wrong, you can actually work in your favour when you're moving on to the bigger fights. Because if you're a prospect that's just pissing it and winning every round and not really having any trouble coming through, then in your big opportunity at world level, or your big opportunity for a massive title, you start occurring those moments where things are going wrong. And if you haven't got that experience, you have that know-how, sometimes you can press that panic button because you don't know how you're going to react under pressure. And then that can lead you to not be able to manage those moments, and you get beat. Jordan's proved that he can get through those moments.
I mean, that's why, you know, when you look at boxers who've had very padded records, you know, and they're faced with adversity, people question, you know, how are they going to cope in that moment? And I think, yeah, as you say, Jordan has not just once, you know, a few times proven that actually he copes very well under pressure. And obviously his last fight being the prime example of that. So yeah, really, really exciting. And what a card to be a part of as well. Obviously we've got Katie Taylor headlining. You know, it is a mandatory, but Katie Taylor always brings the heat. And, you know, people have said it, they've said it time and time again, but women's boxing, huge incline that it's on, it's growing exponentially. And women headlining shows has become, you know, a thing now. I've just asked Jordan, you know, how does he feel about being on the Katie Taylor undercard? And he's like, you know, what an honour. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's fantastic, isn't it? I actually think, and I don't want people to take this the wrong way, but Sky did that Clarissa Shields and Savannah Marshall show the other week, and it was like, it's the first all female card. It's fantastic. It's fantastic for female boxing. I don't look at it like that. I just think that those two main fights, Bumgarner against Michaela Miller as well as the main event, I think those two main fights were just brilliant headline fights anyway, regardless of whether it's a women's or it's topping a women's show. Well, I actually thought that would have been like, if you were doing a big headline world title fight for anybody, for a male show or whatever you want to call it, those could top that. And Katie Taylor's a name where, again, it doesn't matter whether it's women's boxing or not. She's a name in boxing. Maybe 6 years ago when she started, then it's like a big, it's a massive thing. But I think that the game's developed now, and the women that have put on these fights and performed and given the fans the entertainment and brought the attention and turned a lot of the people that are like a little bit into actually like, fucking hell, that's a good fight. I mean, Katie Taylor against Serrano was unbelievable, you know, and so I think it's a little bit of disservice when people keep saying, oh, you know, it's great for women's boxing that she's headline. It's just a fight. It's just a fight or a fighter that's big enough now to headline a show, regardless of whether it's male or female on the bill. And
can I play devil's advocate?
Go on.
Okay. So I think you're right. You're absolutely right. And as a woman in the industry, I totally agree. But I still think that there are people, fans, boxing fans out there, that are on the way to being sold to that exact progressive notion within the fighting world. But maybe they're not quite there yet. And so I feel that when we champion the phrase women's boxing, it helps them get there quicker. And I think you're absolutely correct. Maybe in just a few months down the line, or 6 months or a year from now, we won't be saying words like women's boxing. It'll just be another fight, another fighter, etc. But I don't know if we're there quite yet.
No, I get that. But it's like, I look at it as if, so say if you came here, who's on doing the card a little bit lower down the card? So I don't know. Just Johnny Fisher. So Johnny Fisher sells a lot of tickets, so maybe. But if you were to do a show, and if you said, right, John Edges was topping bill, you'd be like, what? He's not at that level yet. That's a man. So he has to earn the right, develop through, and then become top at bill, right? So it's the same thing for these ladies now, these women's boxers now. They've developed through, they become names where they can draw a crowd, where they're in fights that are big enough to be headline attractions. Then it doesn't matter if it's a women's fight or a man's fight, they're big enough to be a headline attraction, and that's what I mean. I don't mean to be saying it as it's women's boxing or
no, I agree.
It's not. You know, I understand that in some people's minds you need to say, oh yeah, women's boxing, but I think that's there. They've got to look at a bigger picture. Shields, absolutely unbelievable. Whether she's male or female, she is shit up, right? Savannah Marshall punches like a. Whether she's male or female, Oh man, I don't get punched off with Savannah Marshall, right? So as a boxer, these women are doing it. Katie Taylor's doing it. Ellie Scottney doing it. You watched Ellie Scottney's last fight, I think it was, or last fight I was at. She had a right tear up. And you're looking at it thinking, male or female, as a boxer, if they're delivering, they're delivering. Don't get me wrong. There are some. The game's not at a point now yet where the depth is there. It's not there. Tasha Jonas. I love watching Tasha Jonas fight.
One of my favourites.
She can punch and she brings it, and I love watching it.
So technical.
But it's the same as male boxing. There are males that I won't turn on the telly for because I don't either. They're not that level, or they just don't do it. I just don't rate them, or I'm not interested in their career, or they're not. I don't think they're good enough to be headlining of this. So I'd probably miss that show. And if something dramatic, I'd go and catch it up. It's the same for women. Women's game is not strong enough yet to have a loads and loads. But the girls that are coming through now, and the next generation is going to be unbelievable. Because I've seen some of the amateur girls now, and you think, shit, they're getting better and better and better. So each generation that develops, it's getting better and better. So I think people need to see the bigger picture and
I totally agree with you. Please don't get me wrong. I totally agree with you. But I feel that the reason that the next generation is getting better and why there's so much of a drive at the moment and so much inspiration amongst female amateurs is because people have been saying things like women's boxing, and helping it develop in that way. So I sometimes just feel that you need to go too far in one direction to find the balance.
I suppose, but I'm different. I'll say because people keep saying Katie Taylor and watching Katie Taylor.
I mean, don't get me wrong, Katie Taylor
and Clarissa Shields and watching Clarissa Shields and these women where you do, because if it's women's boxing and you watch it and it's trash, you're not going to watch it again. But if it's women's boxing, but it happens to be a Katie Taylor fight that you like, or Serrano fight that you like, or whoever it is and you like, Savannah Marshall, and she's banging people out, you're like, people. Do you know what it is? People now are stopping me in the street. And they're not saying to me, hey, do you see that women's fight the other night? They're saying, do you see Clarissa Shields? Do you see Savannah Marshall? Do you see Kate? They're talking to me about names. So I'm seeing it from that angle where I'm now getting stopped, where people aren't stopping me and saying, they're all right for women, aren't they? Because that's how it used to be. I remember when I think I commentated on Katie Taylor's debut. And I said then, I'd never seen women's boxing. I'd never watched women's boxing. I was like, she fights like a man. I'd never say that now because she's a fighter. That's it. Because it's not that novelty anymore. I think they've earned the right to be called fighters, boxers. And some of them are better than others, like men.
They have 100% earned that right, particularly ones like Katie Taylor and Clarissa Shields and Savannah Marshall. You know, they've certainly been in those fights where they've earned that right, as have every other woman, to be fair. But I do get your point. I get yours
as well. It's just you see it. I see it different like that. Yeah. And I'll probably get shot down by someone for thinking that way. It's just what it is.
So in terms of obviously what's going on in the rest of the boxing world, let's say, so we've obviously got Dillian Whyte returning towards the end of the month. You know, under a new coaching team, should be really interesting. And obviously we've had Eddie Hearn suggest that perhaps the AJ Dillian fight. Will be on the cards early next year. What do you make of that fight?
I think everyone would love to see it, wouldn't they? The first one was mad. I was there at that one. And you got everybody getting ring and kicking off. It was mad. Proper mad fight. They've both mellowed a little bit since then, I think. I think they've both got respect for each other now. I don't expect to see any of that sort of madness. But whenever those two get to, you know it's going to be a tear-up. You know it's going to be an exciting fight. So, yeah, I think that's a great fight. I think it's a fight that I would love to see.
In terms of, obviously, you know, they're at an interesting point in their careers. They both had a couple of losses. So maybe actually a really timely fight as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think we put too much emphasis on timing for fights. And when we're waiting for that perfect timing, the fucking never happens. Mm-hmm. You know? There's a few fights like that right now, and you know, and so just to hell with timing. If the fight is big at the time, don't be greedy and think, wait until it gets bigger. Just make the fight, and if it's a great fight, do it again when it's even bigger.
That's what the fans want, right?
That's it, 100%, and that's what the sport needs.
Derek Chisora and Tyson Fury, thoughts?
Really pleased for Derek.
Great fight for Derek.
fantastic fight for Derek. It's what he's worked for. It's what he wants. Probably what he's been hanging around for. And he's proved everybody wrong in getting it. I mean, I said to him after the Parker fight, I said, mate, perfect time to retire. Crowd was singing your name, walking out after a loss, gave it everything. You got nothing more to give to the sport.
In terms of obviously Tyson Fury facing Alexander Usyk for undisputed at heavyweight, you know, Alexander Usyk is exceptionally fantastic, skilled boxer. He's extremely small compared to Tyson Fury. You know, I think Alexander Usyk is 6'1" or 6'3" or something like this.
Fury's bigger than everybody.
And Fury 6'9", right? And he's also skilled and technical and, you know, has a boxing IQ of a legend. How do you see that fight playing out?
I think it'd be a stinker. I think it'd be brilliant. It'd be brilliant if you like boxing skills. I love boxing skills, so I'll watch that all day long. And I'd watch that and I'd love to watch it. But I think the majority of people, I think it's a stinker because you've got two highly skilled fighters and cancelling each other out and yeah, but I think it's a good fight I'd like to see. Obviously I'd like to see that, but I like boxing like that as well as your tear-ups. I like that. So I just think I'm a big fan of Usyk. I really am. Yeah, for me it's just a case of, is Fury too big? Is he too long? Does that negate what Usyk's good at? I think if they're both the same size, I think Usyk wins the fight. But I just think that element of size and that
size matters.
Changes. Well, apparently, not if you're my height.
I like that. So finally, obviously, you know, we've just recently heard yesterday. I think it came out that Conor Benn has relinquished his license before sort of the determinations of potential contamination or taking performance enhancing substances. Thoughts?
I don't know enough about it. I've been focusing on Jordan's fight, and then I saw last night everybody going on Twitter about it. I saw the statement. I don't know. He's been advised to, because he's been advised all through this process by lawyers. So who am I to say that's wrong if his lawyers are telling him that's right? Because I don't know what's going off behind the scenes. I don't know why they said to do that. It's just shit. It just needs to be cleared up. I just think the whole system of drug testing, the finances behind it needs to be sorted out. I think it's just not good enough. I think there's too much confusion behind it. It's like with the testing laboratories and testing companies, why is there and I'm not saying, or it shouldn't happen. No, it shouldn't happen. But I'm not saying that. I'm not blaming anyone as such. But if that's your job to be a drug tester and to look after the sample and to get it to the lab, why are we hearing that sample could be contaminated? Do your fucking job. That's what you're supposed to be doing. You're playing with fighters' lives here, because if you contaminated that, or you've contaminated it in a lab, why is it being contaminated? How was it being contaminated in a lab with this trace of stuff? How has that got there? I don't understand how that can happen. So I would like people to explain to me how it can happen, because if that's your job, if you're being paid 40 grand a pop to test these fighters, and you're contaminated in transmission, or if the beaker or whatever that you're pissing to is contaminated already, why and how? Because that's your job. That shouldn't be out of that, because that's fighter's reputation. Because then if he hasn't taken anything, then you've ruined a man's reputation for nothing. But there's always a cloud. If somebody fails, and it's like, well, oh, is it me? Is it this? Is it whatever? And it's like, well, have they cheated? Haven't they cheated? We need to know. And also, going forward, we need it to be more. There's in sport, there's billions and billions of pounds, or dollars, or whatever you want to call it, pumped into sport, and people are earning billions. Organisations are earning shitloads. Why is the testing procedures for each sport? Because I know UCAD do all the sports. I understand that all these agencies do all the sports, and what's on football's banned list might not be on boxing's banned list, and vice versa. There's two examples. So different sports have different substances that aren't allowed and that are allowed. So that makes things even more complicated. So there's a whole heap of things that need to be clarified in order for things to be moved forward. I just think that, like with the border control, they take a percentage of every show, every promoter's show. I know because I used to be a promoter. So even if I lost money on shows, I still had to pay the board tax. Right? Still, I remember once we lost shitloads on one of my shows. I'm not Eddie Earn, and I said to the board, really, is there any way we can not have to pay it on this one? It's like, can put me more into debt, basically. It means that you lose even more. No, we still have to pay blah, 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 blah. You still have to pay your board tax. So they're making off. Can you imagine the money they're making off Eddie, Frank, all the big promoters, Sky shows with boxing, all the big promoters? I get they've got things, it costs them money to run the offices, run this, run that. But the fighters' costs to get a licence is going up every year. Manager's licence is going up. Everybody's licence is going up every year. They're getting the money. How's about filtering somebody into so you make sure that your drug testing is more? Because I'm seeing more and more fighters come out and say, well, I've been a pro, I've had X amount of fights and I've never been tested, this. Fucking hell. Let's clean sport up. Because if there's got to be some sort of money going from all this money that's floating around somewhere, whether it's 1% from promoters' fees or whatever that goes to the big promoters' fees, even if it's 1% that goes towards drug testing as a whole for the board to be able to get more random drug testing. It's a random drug testing we need, not shit where, oh, well, they're in camp, right. Because there's fighters that turn around and saying, oh, I've retired, or turn around and being injured for God knows how long and they don't get tested. There's a fight day, okay, let's go along and test him. But what about in between? So I think there's so much more that needs doing. I don't have all the answers. I'm just a coach. And I just see it as I'm frustrated because I'm getting asked questions like this. When you've got this sport can be the greatest sport in the world, but it's getting tarnished right now, and people are just looking at it and making out as though I see stuff on Instagram or on Twitter where people say, they're all like it. I'm like, no, they're fucking not. And that's such a disrespect to, I would say, I don't know what percentage. I'd like to say 90s, 95% of boxers. I'd like to say that. I don't know, because we don't know. So I just think we need to clean the sport up.
Perhaps with such a high-profile, drug allegation in the sport, perhaps this will be the impetus to clean the.
You'd hope so. But are they just going to hide behind the fact and say, "Oh, it's too expensive"? Because that's what the board can do. Oh, it's expensive to do that. Or are you going to put that onto the promoters, and then you've got 3-4 promoters that've got money, and then the rest of the promoters are operating on a shoestring, and then they can't afford to do that. This is why I think it's got to be a governing body. If you're the governing body, then you need to clean your shit up. Don't pass it on to the promoters, because they're already paying to be a promoter, paying for promoter's license, paying for tax and things like that to be a promoter. Don't put it onto a fighter's license, because the fighters are already paying shitloads for a medical, shitloads for a license every year, and the majority of them are earning absolute buttons. So if you want to be the governors and we control the sport, then fucking control the sport.
Yeah, absolutely right. Couldn't agree with you more. But that aside, very much looking forward to seeing Jordan in the ring on Saturday night. Very much looking forward to seeing what the team has been working on. And thank you so much for your time.
No problem. Cheers.